been a tragic week for West Virginia and the greater coal mining community. On Thursday, there was a fatality at the Mettiki mine in Tucker County, West Virginia, along with another mine worker who was injured. A young man, 25 years old, lost his life. And then on Saturday, my wife texted me and she's asking about this other mine, and I hadn't heard of anything that was going on. But we later found out that there had been an inundation of water, meaning that there was an inflow of water into the underground mine workings. How that happened is not clear to me yet, but most likely they mined into an abandoned mine or something like that, which caused, like I said, water to flood into the mine openings. One mine worker is unaccounted for and is missing. The remainder made it out safe. Currently, they're pumping water out of the mine. There are mine rescue teams on site. They've drilled a couple of holes into the mine. I don't know what the results of those were, but it has been done, and there are 3 dive teams on site who are attempting to search the waters as well. So that's where things stand right now as we speak. At this mine, that's the Rolling Thunder mine in Drennan, West Virginia, which is in Nicholas County. And so if you remember back to the introduction to the director video that I made about myself, you'll know that that's where I'm from. So this hits very close to home, and there's a pretty high likelihood that I know who this person is. Okay, so with that, I took the executive decision of steering the course into what we're going to be talking about today, and we're going to be discussing the year-to-date underground mining fatalities. But before we get into that, I've been told that I have a lot of stories and a lot of experience, and that I need to share that. So with that, I'm going to start off with a story about what some have titled The Miracle of Hominy Falls. And I have to agree that that's probably a really good title for this. So on the morning of May the 6th, 1968, miners at the Saxsewell No. 8 mine in Hominy Falls, Nicholas County, West Virginia, cut into unmapped flooded workings. Okay. The amount of water that was coming through the No. 3 heading where they cut in was described to be like opening the gates on Summersville Dam. Now this dam had only been there about 2 years, right? And this was before they put in the hydroelectric part of the plant. So they're talking about what you see in this picture. I'm talking about like 3 tubes, just blasting water. That's what they described it as, which is significant, right? They're saying that, the water was roof to floor and rib to rib, right? And in this mine, they were mining with presumably Wilcox miners. I know they were mining with an auger type miner. That's probably what they were using. And they were mining 32 to 34 inches high. So there, it's a, thin seam. But the headings were advanced 30 feet wide. Okay, I'll show you on the map right now, actually. So when they would drive these rooms off, right, this is what they were rooming off to the side. And if you remember when I explained, some of these maps, that were mined in the 40s and 50s, in this case the 60s even, where they tended to advance with 3 or 4 entries, and then room off the sides, right? And I told you that they widened those. So So what they were doing here was they were mining 30 feet wide, and then when they got out to the end, they would widen it out to 60 feet wide. And right, so they cut in number 3. There were 5 men in that heading. 4 of them perished, but one somehow grabbed a hold of the pan line. Right? So that's what they were using for haulage back to the belt, was a pan line. Just like you do on a longwall nowadays, right? And he grabbed a hold of it and was lacerated in the process, but it threw him over into the number 2 heading, knocked him unconscious, but he was alive. And that's miracle number 1, I think, right there, that happened. All right, so why didn't water get over into the number 1 and number 2 headings? Some credit that not punching through a crosscut for 150 feet in that heading saved the lives of those that were in number 1 and number 2. Because, So, and what had happened was that miner over in number 2 was broken down. And so they just skipped the crosscut, right? So the miner was broken down, and that's why one of the, I don't know if he's an electrician or what, but there was somebody over there working on that miner, and that's who noticed the guy get thrown over into number 2, and obviously the water rushing by. I mean, it was loud, right? And so, anyways, there is another theory as to why the inflow of water did not go over into the number 1 heading, and some believe the immediate inrush, right, where it was all encompassing of the opening, created an air pocket or bubble which kept water from flowing over there, so the air was pressurized. And that is possible. I don't know for sure if it happened here or not. It's possible. Because, Q Creek, for example, if you watch the documentary, which I did, those miners talk about how initially the water was waist deep. And when they drilled the first hole in to attempt to rescue those guys, that water level increased and was about neck level. So that indicates that yes, indeed, that water was that air was pressurized by the water somehow, and created that bubble. Fortunately for them, it didn't completely collapse it, but it is possible that could have been going on here. There was a second group of miners that were trapped in this area. That's where most of them were. Okay, so they retreated to higher ground, and so did the 2 miners that were down in this area, because you've got water coming out these south mains, right? And it just so it was blocking basically all access, and came up to an elevation that was, I don't know exactly where, but up in here somewhere. So that's where the majority of the mine workers were. And after 6 days of pumping, rescuers located the first 15 survivors, including one man, Andy Walton, who I got to spend a lot of my, I guess I'll call it later youth, when I was in high school and that sort of thing. I went to high school with his grandson, and we were both on the wrestling team and that sort of thing. So we used to raccoon hunt, hunt raccoons at night with dogs, and so I spent a lot of nights in the woods with that. I say old man, he was old when I was young, and unfortunately he passed away recently, but he made it up there in years, which is awesome, right? Because he almost didn't survive this day, right? For the remaining 6 miners, it would take another 4 days to get to them, and of course, communication had been cut off, and you know they didn't know what they were going to see, what they were going to find when they got there, and you know, to have 6 out of 10 miners still being alive after their section cut into a mine. I mean, that's amazing, and that's where this became known as the miracle of Hominy Falls. And so I'm telling you this story because this is both a story of tragedy and a story of happiness, right? 4 families were devastated, but 21 families got a miracle that day. So with that, that's what we're hoping for now. A miracle for the one. Okay, so with that story, we're going to move into discussing the 5 underground mining fatalities that have occurred in this country so far this year. There's been 3 in coal and 2 in metal, non-metal. And if you go on the MSHA website, you'll be able to find all the list of fatalities that includes the fatality reports. It will tell you, it'll give you the initial report, the fatality alert, which is shown here, and a final report. Some of these don't have the final report out yet, and then of course for the one that occurred Thursday, even the initial report's not out yet. So we're just going to focus on the 4 that we do have reports for. And this first fatality on January 10th was classified as a powered haulage accident. This occurred in central Pennsylvania, over in Somerset, where if you remember when we talked about haulage, I discussed that they use a lot of continuous haulage systems, right? So on that day, a mobile bridge carrier pinned the operator against the coal rib, causing fatal injuries. In these fatality alerts, you're going to see a list of best practices. And what I want to point out about these is, this is absolutely not to say that these are not good best practices. They are, but I want you to know that these are canned responses. Okay, so when this is what the fatality involves, they'll put these canned responses as best practices, which is fine. But it doesn't necessarily give you a lot of information about what actually went on here. For that, you're going to need to go into the report itself. But some of those best practices are to stay out of pinch points and red zone areas, staying in the operator's compartment when operating the equipment, activating a de-energizing device or panic bar before you get out, that sort of thing, is all in here. Okay. The second fatality, July 12th, was a fall of rooferback. In the case of, I don't remember if you remember the hard rock mining terminology, but in that case they used back as the top, or in stone. Sometimes in hard rock, if it's steeply dipping, or if it's dipping, even moderately, they'll call it a hanging wall and footwall. Okay, so, but in this case, we're talking about the roof or the top. And so the miner was operating this load haul dump, LHD, mucking out this blasted area when material from this active stope fell onto it and killed him. So again, best practices, only traveling areas with ground support system designed, installed, and maintained to control the ground well. Okay, and I can't see the ground support in this case. I don't know what they're using, but I do know that there are limestone mines that don't routinely roof bolt, so this wouldn't apply to them. Understand and follow the ground control procedures and mining methods. Maybe they weren't, I don't know. Perform work from a safe location, of course. Only travel within designated safety zones or signage, hazardous areas, and conduct thorough work examinations. That's probably the best one here. Be sure to conduct your thorough workplace examinations before starting shift, after you blast, as conditions warrant. Just examine the workplace as needed. That's probably a big one. The third fatality occurred in a platinum mine. I think there's only one. I think that's this Stillwater mine out in Montana. And this was an electrical accident. On that day, July 26th, an electrician was electrocuted when he came in contact with one phase of a 13.2 volt three-phase power source. In the best practices, it says always lock out, tag out, and try out electrical equipment prior to work. I've noticed more and more of safety education adding on the try out to what used to be called lock and tag out procedures. So they're adding that in there, and that's fine. I think that's something that we had mostly done in the past anyways, right? Lock it out, and then you try to turn it on to make sure it is de-energized, and of course you need to be verifying the circuits are de-energized with with circuit testing equipment and that sort of thing. But just throwing that out there, that this tryout is sort of a new thing, but it's something we've tried to do as much as we could over time, because you never know, like, when you're just going to make a mistake. What if you just lock and tag out the wrong cat head, right? So that's why there's multiple stages to what to do when you're working on electrical equipment. And then the fourth accident was limestone mine, Heidelberg Materials up at Torrance. So blaster was loading holes from the ground. A piece of roof fell and struck him. In these mines, the roof's pretty high, right? So even small pieces in limestone, especially, can be very hazardous, right? So best practices being be alert for changes in the roof face and ribs. Yeah, we should always be looking for that when we're on the ground. Installing ground support where the conditions indicate it's necessary. Yeah, sounds about right. Scale roof and ribs. Yeah. Examine and test the roof face and ribs in areas where work is going to be performed prior to doing the work. And then training miners on how to identify hazardous roof conditions. I think that's probably the big one here, right? Training is important, and we do need to get better at training miners on how to identify hazardous conditions, be it roof, rib, other things, right? Just any hazardous conditions. We need to get better at identifying those things, and we're working on it. We really are, with better instructional technique, and in the future, I see that eventually we'll be using it, and we're already starting to use augmented and virtual reality to sort of better train, right? And we're working in that direction already. And then, of course, like I said, you have the fifth fatality, which was the mine worker, in Tucker County, which, like I said, the preliminary report and it's not out yet, so the investigation is still ongoing. But because of what happened last week, I think it's good that we talk about this now. So with that, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.